Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity, and Love. My name is Michael Andre Ford. I'm your host out of San Antonio, Texas. Today, we have a very special guest from England. He's originally from Wales. He does fantastic work, fantastic projects, fantastic visioning. Let's make up a word. I'm happy to introduce Iwan Brioc, theater, mindfulness, and a new series on YouTube, 4 Simple Questions. We're going to mention his website and everything else, how you can find him, how you can watch this series. Episode 1 has Lisa Cairns in it and also Carl Friston. You have to check this out. 4 simple questions. I have to cheat and look at what those 4 simple questions are. But the 4 simple questions that get people talking philosophically are, who am I? What is this all around us and within life? Why is this? And then what's it like to be me? And he takes 2 people who are not in the same field who constructively and gently and compassionately share. So it's quite a work. It reminds me of my days at Andover. I loved English classes. I loved analyzing books. So everything literary thrilled me. And this brought back that vibration. So I have to thank Iwan for being here today. You are such a inner fearless, peaceful warrior, carving out a path for all of us in humanity as you put a spotlight on what it is to be alive, to allow more, share more, hopefully love. And so, Iwan, thank you for being on Angels, Positivity, and Love.
No, thank you so much for inviting me, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it came out of the blue like an angel, this invite.
I know folks for years to come are going to enjoy this. Okay, so you're in Stroud, England, but you also have a place in Cardiff, and that's Wales next door. You're Welsh. You speak more than one language. We'll get into that later. You're a theater director. You have the Labyrinth experience in the past, which I'm not going to use the proper lingo, but that's been a really big deal. Your guided meditations on the mindfulness side are at Insight Timer. But can you tell us a little bit, and by the way, your name, it's Iwan Brioc, BRIOC.com for your website if people want to jump the gun. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, but how it's evolved? And I believe it's constantly evolved. And you've spent a lot of time sharing the enthusiasm behind acting, theater, but more, the self-exploration that goes hand in hand with every step in theater if you want to keep growing, and how you've also shared that with youth, not just adult actors.
Sure. Where should I start the story? I guess there were certain, you asked me about angels, and I struggled with that. But the word that came in its place was Epiphanies. Now, in my work, I use the word Epiphanies a lot, and I never realized the religious connotations of it until recently. But an epiphany is like being visited by an angel, I guess. And I have loads of those. And the work I do is explained through epiphanies, which is one of the pleasures of doing this work, because you end up being a storyteller around it as well. But my own, I guess I had an epiphany when I was 8, around who I was. I had this question come into my mind. And I was just floating, but it was also terrifying. It's absolutely like a terrifying experience of being in an abyss of unknowing, and that stayed with me. So that as I was growing up, there was always this feeling of not knowing the first thing, and that's stayed with me ever since. And I guess that's why I've been drawn to non-duality in later life, that this understanding that we don't know the first thing, really. I mean, we have lots of knowledge and ideas and impressions about the world and things beyond the world, but right at the center, we know nothing of who we really are. Everything is a story, and that's a wonderful thing when you accept it as a story. So from there, I guess another epiphany was I was about 14 in my high school. And a man came into the school with a film can. In those days, film was what it is. It's the reel, And he came with a film can under his arm, and he asked the head teacher if he could show us the film. And shows, like, this is the 1970s. it shows how kind of different schools were then. And he said, yeah, sure. And that film turned out to be The War Game. So The War Game was commissioned by the BBC in 1965, but they banned it as soon as they saw it because it was a terrifying, it was the first kind of fake documentary, if you like. It looked like a documentary. It was in black and white, but it was about what would happen if one megaton bomb landed in central London. And I guess that was my first awakening. It was horrific in the sense that after seeing it, I couldn't be indifferent to the world. And that was the first epiphany. I have to do something about this. And the second was that an aesthetic experience could have such a transformational experience. So those two aspects really guided me as well, which is that, we can't be passive in the face of the state of the world. And the second is, art can change things, and aesthetic experience can give epiphanies, if you like. So that's been the focus of my work since then. I've had several teachers on the way, which I'm really grateful for. Jiddu Krishnamurti was probably the first, and I went to his school in Hampshire. He's got a school in Ojai as well. And he was a very deep thinker, if you like, from India. I mean, if you've never looked into Jiddu Krishnamurti's history, it's a fascinating story. He was picked by the Theosophical Society as the new Messiah. And he was brought up like a very rich person. He was friends with Greta Garbo and Charlie Chaplin. All the news headlines in the 1920s, this is the Washington Post, international headlines was "The Messiah is coming." There was a lot of pressure on him. And a bit like that film, Life of Brian, he turned around and said, "I'm not your Messiah." And he dismissed his disciples and some of them were famous, like Rudolf Steiner and Kandinsky. And he taught a very specific message, which you could think of as non-duality. And now we have all these non-duality speakers on YouTube, but he was the very first, I would say, who spoke on camera about these things. Unfortunately, he died in 1987. I was at the school in 1988, but there happened to be a person who was very close to Krishnamurti, a very influential quantum physicist called David Bohm, and he would visit regularly, and I had an opportunity to meet and talk with him. Now, he's got a fascinating story as well. So David Bohm's was PhD. His supervisor was Oppenheimer, very much in the news at the moment. And Einstein said he had two intellectual heirs. One was Richard Feynman, and the other one was David Bohm. Now, the issue with David Bohm is he was a member of the Communist Party. And Oppenheimer, in his interrogation, named him. And he was sent into exile into Buenos Aires, and then to Israel, and then he came to the UK. And he understood quantum physics perhaps better than most people alive, and he saw how it pointed to a unity. And yet his PhD was classified. He wasn't able to read his own PhD because it was needed for the atomic bomb, for the development of the atomic bomb. So there was a lot of pain in David about the consequences that we see in Oppenheimer a little bit, but in David, it really it caused mental illness. If you can imagine, this is an incredibly advanced brain that needed electroconvulsive therapy in his life just to survive. But he was a deeply compassionate man, and I was very glad to have met him. And so again, the roots of this, what I'm doing now, bringing scientists together to talk with awakened people, were laid back in that time as well. Where can I go from there? So I studied film after seeing that film in school. But the process of making film at that time was so, I guess I like immediate results. So I went from film to theater. And I wasn't sure what I was doing in theater until I experienced the work of another man called Augusto Boal, whose work is called The Theatre of the Oppressed. So Augusto is the man who tells stories to explain his theatre, and they're wonderful stories. So I'll share a few with you now, if that's okay.
Please.
So Augusto studied chemistry in Columbia University in New York, but he skipped his lessons and he went to the actor's studio, Lee Strasberg's actor's studio, and this would have been the time when Al Pacino and people like that were studying there. And when he came back to Brazil, which at the time was run by a military junta, 1% of the population owned all the wealth, which is pretty similar to the rest of the world now. And he worked as a deputy director, I think, of Sao Paulo University. And he wanted to make a theater of the people. He wanted to provoke a revolution. Yeah, and he would tour the villages with what's called agitation propaganda. So these are plays that would incite the villagers to take arms and fight against the landowners who had their own haciendas. It was like feudalism, really. The landowners ran the plantations. They took land off the farmers and made them work their own land, just like slaves. And most of these plays would have, marches with rifles and songs, and the actors would sing, we will spill our blood for our motherland, and it was very patriotic. And in one village, after the play, the chief of the village came up to Augusto and said, "We are inspired by your play. We are moved. We realize we cannot continue to live as dogs. We will do what you say. We have some rifles stored, and we will take them, and we will go to the hacienda, and we will fight against the landlord and his army, his private army. And you will come with us." And Augusto said, "Well, I'm an actor, actually. We're actors, we're not soldiers." And he said, Virgilio, his name was, and he said, "We're not actors, we're farmers. I mean, we're not soldiers, we're farmers. So, you'll be with us in solidarity. We will fight for our motherland. We will spill our blood for our motherland." And Augusto says, "Yeah, but we haven't got guns. They're props. They're not real guns. They don't shoot." And Virgilio said, "It's okay. We will probably have enough between us. Some of us will be killed. You'll be able to pick up our rifles and continue the fight." And then Augusto said, "Yeah, but if we die, then we can't go to the next village to perform the play." So Virgilio said, "I see. So when you sang, 'We will spill our blood for our motherland,' you meant our blood, not your blood." And in that moment, Augusto, something happened. And he realized, what am I doing? Making plays, telling people how to live their lives. So he developed a method from there where the actors would portray the reality, the oppression, and then the audience would make suggestions of how to change the story. That's called simultaneous dramaturgy. So that was the next stage of this theater. And they were touring the play. And it was a literacy project. Maybe you've heard of Paulo Freire, but it was a project he'd initiated, and I think it was in Peru. And this lady came to him, and she said, "I have a story that I'd like to be put on stage, and I don't know if it's a political story, but because I know you like to do political theater, but it's happening to me right now, and I don't know what to do." So she said, "I live in the favela, and we're building a house in the city, and I work all week, and I get paid, and I give my husband the money, and he goes in the weekend, and he comes back with receipts for materials for the house. Now, I don't read, so I can't read these receipts. So I asked the teacher in the project to tell me what these receipts were for, and I was a bit suspicious because they smell of perfume. And my teacher told me, they're actually not receipts. They're love letters from his lover in the city, thanking him for the good time that he'd given her that weekend. Now, he's coming back tomorrow, and I don't know what to do. So Augusto said, well, it is a political story, because actually the reason you can't leave him is because you're not safe in this society to be alone. So they put the play on, and it's a big audience watching, and they end at the point where the husband is coming home. And then they ask the audience, what should we do? Somebody puts their hand up and says, well, you could just pack his clothes and throw them out, and he can pick them up and change the lock. So they try that, and he asks the audience, is that what you want? The actor playing the husband has come and picked up the stuff, and he says, okay, I'll go and live with my lover in the city, and he leaves. And the audience aren't happy. That's not the solution they want. So somebody said, well, maybe she should leave, just find another place to be. You can't live with this man who's treated you so badly. So the husband comes home to an empty house. The woman's gone. The actress who plays the woman is gone. He phones his lover, says, hey, come and live with me here. We've got an empty house. Of course, the audience is not happy. Then there's this woman, and in the story, she sort of grows in size. So she's quite a large woman, and she says, no, when he comes back, you have to have a clear conversation. Okay. And only when he understands you can you forgive him. Okay. A clear conversation. And then if he understands, you can forgive him. Say, okay, so Augusto, who's kind of directing at the moment from between the audience and the actors on stage in this role, became known as a joker. And he says, okay, let's try this. So the husband comes home, the wife lets him in, and she says, she's a really good actress, and she's really distraught. There are real tears. She says, you've broken my heart, what you've done. The world has fallen out. The bottom of my world has collapsed. What have you done to me? And the husband, feels very remorseful. So, I'm so sorry what I've done. I promise I'll be a better man from now on. But I'm very hungry. Can you make my dinner? And the wife goes and makes the dinner. And this lady in the audience says, no, you don't understand. I said a clear conversation. Okay? And only if he understands this clear conversation can you forgive him. So Augusto said, okay, let's go with the scene again. The husband comes home. The actress is a little bit more angry now. Says, no, you're not coming in here until you understand how I feel. You've really hurt me, and this isn't going to happen. Very much more assertive. Augusto's given a little bit of direction. And the husband's there, he's not even allowed in the house until he kind of apologizes profusely and promises never to do the thing, what he's been doing. And of course, she lets him in. And he says, now, yes, I'm so grateful to be back home. I'm very hungry after my journey. Can you make my dinner? And the wife goes, yes, of course I will. Now you understand, and I'll make you dinner. And she goes off to the kitchen. And this woman in the audience is now turning deep shade of red. Saying, no, you don't understand. Shall I show you? And Augusto said, okay. And she gets up. She walks down from the audience onto the stage, and she pushes gently the actress to the side. Says, okay, I'm the wife now. And the husband comes home, and he comes in. This woman, she grabs a broom and starts hitting him over the head. He's on the floor, collapsed, and she's saying, do you understand? And he says, yes. Okay, now that's a clear conversation. Now go and make my dinner, she says. And in this moment, Boal said, if you make people feel strongly enough, they will get up from the audience and they will show you. And when they show you, it's much clearer than words alone. And that kind of action, that moment, what he said was the birth of the spect actor, not a spectator, but a spect actor. And this was also the birth of what's called forum theatre, which is one of the main techniques in theatre of the oppressed. Now, so I trained in this. I experienced it. I said, this is why I'm doing theatre. I found my motivation, as the actors say. And I trained with Augusto and Adrian Jackson in London. And I still train people in that internationally. And what's interesting in this is that when that woman got up onto the stage and invented forum theatre, and when you do this, you'd say, right, I'm going to do the play, and we're going to do it twice. And the second time we do the play, anybody can shout stop in the audience, and they can come up and change the story. So in the early days, in the 90s, when I started doing this, I knew when I explained the form first that people couldn't hear it. Just like they say the Aboriginal people couldn't see ships, Captain Cook's ships offshore, and the same with the native peoples of South America. They didn't have the visual vocabulary to see the ships. Maybe it's the same with us, with angels and UFOs, some of us. And people couldn't hear what I was saying. They just said, I don't understand. Anyway, we do the play. People were emotional. They identified with the main character who was oppressed in the story. And these stories were based on things that are actually happening for that community. And then I say, okay, we'll do it a second time. And this time, any of you can shout stop. And we'll stop, and you come up and show us what you would do. And it was always the same reaction. It was like this. And a laugh, and this incredible laugh. And it was a laugh of expansion, just like we were talking about before we started recording. And I realized that consciousness had changed. Even if they didn't say stop, and people invariably did, but not everybody, but even if they didn't say stop, they viewed what was on the stage differently because they knew they could have said stop. They're constantly looking at it, at what would I do here? And that changed the way they looked at their own narrative in their life as well, that everything isn't just a given. You can actually step in and change things. So everybody who works with this methodology has their own epiphanies, some really beautiful epiphanies. And one that happened to me was when we were touring a forum theatre piece. And this was in the 90s, and there wasn't that much funding around in this time. So there were only 3 actors. I was playing the Joker and the oppressor. So the Joker is the guy who's kind of working with the audience, inviting for interventions. But I was also playing the character that was oppressing. And the play was it was actually funded to tour schools. And it was about careers. And this was an area of North Wales where the economy was very poor and there weren't that many jobs. People were struggling. But the idea was to try and develop a sense of entrepreneurship or ambition among young people. And one of the characters I played was an uncle who's been unemployed a long time, had tried lots of jobs, and he'd come back to the daughter and say, look, there's no point, just get pregnant and take the benefits. And he was a very strong oppressor because I guess most of the kids had somebody like that in their lives at that time. And most of the kids wanted to do violence. So there are some rules in Theatre of the Oppressed, which is that you can do violence, but there's no physical contact. And, I would often kind of play the part of slapstick of getting knocked around and stuff like that. And I was used to it with this character because they really didn't want to hear what he had to say. And we ended up going to this school with, and I don't know how it was scheduled, but when we got there, we thought this is a mistake because it was a school of people with special needs. And it was a mixture of people with special needs and behavioral problems. So there were mental health issues, but also very disabling congenital disease or disability. And they didn't know we were coming, and it was all a bit awkward. We arrived and we said, okay, well, we can do it. We're here now. We may as well do it. And the other actors, the two actors, really thought, well, should we be doing this? Because these young people, they're not going to have jobs. What jobs are they going to have? And I said, well, we're here. Let's do it. And there were 2 or 3 young men who were more able, and they helped us to put the setup and stuff like that. And they hung around, and they were very curious. And one of them was this boy with very, very red hair. Remember, he had really vivid red hair, and his face was covered in acne, and he had a huge bruised eye, and you just wonder what kind of background is this young boy got. So we come to the scene with this uncle, and I have to describe the scene to you now, because the staff there, to be honest, were not engaged, and they rolled people in on wheelchairs, and they were facing the wrong way. Some of them, they couldn't turn their heads to see, So we felt a bit awkward about it, and there was a lot of noise when we were performing, because that there were people with cerebral palsy or some noises. Anyway, it came to this point, and this boy with red hair said, "Stop." And he came up to me, and he took the place of the protagonist, the woman, the girl that I was the uncle to. And he just turned to me and he said, "Uncle," and this is in Welsh, but he said, "Uncle, never give up. Don't give up." And he floored me. He absolutely floored me. Something exploded. And that's what I love about this theatre. I loved playing the oppressor, because actually when the intervention destroys the mask, destroys the role, what's left is profound. And it was profound for me in that moment, because in that moment, there was total silence. There was just total intelligence in the audience. I was aware that every individual in the audience, no matter what disability, was absolutely pure intelligence. And it was the hardest thing to leave that place, because I knew I was the only person who saw that. Yeah. So I guess after that, there's a lot of theatre of the oppressed, which is about Marxism and revolution, and I'm not questioning or criticizing that aspect, but I thought there was something more, and this method, it was like they were using a Stradivarius to bang a drum, if you know what I mean. It was something so much more profound that we could realize through this work. And it so happened, like a year later, I saw the work of another theatre director from South America. There's a big influence from South America, a Colombian theatre anthropologist called Enrique Vargas. And he was a professor in Bogota University of Theatre. And his bosses in the university wanted him to teach Shakespeare and the classics. And he said, "I don't want to do that. I want to teach about indigenous wisdom and rituals." And they took his tenure away. Well, they couldn't take his tenure away, but they took his students away. So he's a professor without students. But he did have connections in the university. And he found a basement, an empty basement, but it was flooded. So he asked the caretakers if he could try and drain this basement. And then he asked the caretakers, if you have any materials that you're going to throw away, like curtains or anything, just give them to me. And he started constructing a labyrinth in the basement of the university, because he grew up on a coffee plantation. And I never knew this about coffee plants, but they grow right down to the ground, and they form like domes. So, he was very jealous of his cousins who were in the city that had all these entertainments, but he decided he would create his own entertainment with these connecting domes. So when the cousins would come, that he would put on performances where he played all the characters. So he'd create a route for them, and then he knew how all the shortcuts to appear in different places magically. So he started to do that in the basement, and students would come to him, and they started to develop this play called Ariadne's Thread. And the principal heard about this in the university, and he came down to the basement and he said, Enrique, what are you doing down here? And he said, well, I'm just experimenting. You know, I don't have any students, so I just experiment. I still get paid. I want to do work. And the principal said, well, you have to show me what you're doing now. So Enrique got all the students together, and they did the play. And what happens in sensory lab in Enrique's work, and which inspired me, is that the audience goes through a labyrinth. And there are multi-sensory experiences along this labyrinth, installations, if you like. And you talk a lot about smells, and they have a director of smells for this theatre. Oh. Because they understand the power, so there are different smells placed in different areas. Anyway, the principal went through and he was blown away, and he said, you have to enter this into the national, I can't remember the name of a contest that is the most important contest in South America for the arts. And of course it won, and it toured. And it went to Bilbao, from Bogota, went to Bilbao in the year of the Bilbao Expo. And for some strange reason, from there it went to Wales. Yeah. And I saw it, and it blew me away totally. And it actually brought the spiritual aspect that I was seeking, which is a joyful aspect, together with this kind of activism, this wanting to change the world. So Enrique is still alive. He works in Barcelona. He has a company called Teatros de los Sentidos there. And I went to meet him there and see what they were doing. But I'd already started doing my work, and I realized it was on a different tangent to what they're doing as parallel, but different. I mean, they work with actors. They take 5 years to do a play, and they tour festivals, and they are amazing if you ever get a chance to see them. But I work with communities. So I make a labyrinth in a week, and it's performed 3 times maybe. You know, so it became a process for me rather than about performance. And just through the repeated doing of it, I learned so much about the human condition. It's a bit like, you know, in Geneva, they have what's called a Large Hadron Collider, which bangs, you know, the material of reality together to release smaller particles, so we understand. The labyrinth is like the Large Human Collider. You know, people collide in these labyrinths and release just the fundamental particles of what it is to be human. And just to be there to receive that and to see that is wonderful. And you know, after a while in the labyrinth, you start to develop these senses and intuitions about people as they're coming towards you. And the whole thing, after a while, starts to breathe like one organism. And it's a real... I had the best feedback I think I had was from this executive who worked for Pepsi, actually, in the Balkans, and a very kind of straight tie kind of guy. You know, you never think he'd get it really, but he came to me in the end, and he said, "You are blessed to share such information." And I thought, wow, that's it. That's all it is. You know. So. And there are so many epiphanies to talk about in the labyrinth, but sometimes it's best they stay there, you know, because they're difficult to explain. But one I'll share with you, and this is interesting because it ties in with angels, I think. I met a theatre producer in Belgrade who'd written a book called The Food of the Gods, and he had this really interesting theory that, you know, we are the top of the food chain. Nothing eats us. We eat some things that eat other things. And he was curious about, well, who do we feed? And I thought, we feed the gods through the arts. And I love that. You know, it's just an idea, but it's a lovely idea. But I was directing a labyrinth project in Milan. I think it was Milan, yeah. And And at the end of it, it was very, very powerful. And it was in a park, and it was quite interesting experience, but it worked really well. And I remember just in this ancient Roman kind of amphitheater, walking away, finishing the project, walking away, and suddenly I could hear applause from up high. It's like, wow, that's amazing. I felt, well, I've created art. It's not every time, but when you've created art, you can hear the applause, from above. Yeah.
Wow. That's the most unique story I will hear in my lifetime. And there's going to be a bunch more. Beautiful. Would you like me to give you 4 or 5 random quotes? Not so random. One might be from Mother Teresa. It might be about compassion, consciousness. One's from a NASA astronaut, but whatever food for thought pops up for our entertainment, because you're doing a great job today. I'll start off with a random quote. First one. I don't know who this is attributed to, but it's a good one. You do not have to say it, explain it, or understand it to know it. Number 1. Number 2. This is the NASA astronaut, Story Musgrave. I love this credo. You can make it a credo. Getting out of the comfortable path, that's what exploration is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mother Teresa. Now, she's got a bunch while she was alive. People can meet her now. There's a woman who's Swedish, really Canadian, but 30 years in Sweden, who talks about meeting her on the other side, and adopted 2 kids from her when she met her in 97. So compassion is not dependent on any one person's happiness. And laughter is love. And I'll do one more. Well, 2 more. The time is always now. And finally, from an angel named Dale, compassion is just being and trusting the outcome to be of the highest intent for all. Okay, whatever grabs you, and keep going, because I know you can share quite a bit with us in a lot of directions, and there's probably a bunch of stuff coming in right now.
Yeah. I like the first one, the first quote. What came to mind is, do you want to repeat the first one?
Sure. It's you do not have to say it, explain it, or understand it to know it.
Yeah. This is in this theater. It's called Sensory Labyrinth Theater. The methodology I created around it. It's not a kind of play where you get the audience applause at the end, because the audience comes through one at a time, and they go through the labyrinth, and there might be about 15 actors, or I don't call them actors, I call them gatekeepers, actually, in the labyrinth. And their role is to in the same sense that Rumi talked about these two worlds. The door is round and open, and their role is to hold that door open and invite people, never push, but invite people to fall with them through that door. Anyway, the best feedback I have is when people can't speak at the end. Yeah. It's not that they don't have to explain, they can't. They cannot explain what's happened. And a lot of my theorizing, if you like, which brought about this whole theory called context-oriented arts, is about what's happening there. I actually went back to university to study mindfulness, to try and understand what's happening when these people come out, and when they can speak, they say, my old life is over. Starting again like a child, or I feel complete now, and it was just like a 1 hour, 1.5 hour experience. So I thought, what's my responsibility here? I have to be, make sure that I'm not causing harm. So I went back and I did a master's in mindfulness in Bangor University. And I understood something, which was theater is very much like consciousness. Maybe theater is consciousness in the sense that, when theater was the first human invention, right? Because when you can imagine yourself in the future and the past, that you've created theater. You're a character in a play. And there are different modes of theater, very clearly, and those different modes create different modes of consciousness. So the classical mode, if you like, with the proscenium, and we're in the audience and we clap, that's the only thing we have to do. We watch, we're entertained, we identify with the character. That's the Cartesian model of the self. You know, I'm an observer and I am observing things out there. I think, therefore I am. And that kind of reinforces that consciousness. And then there's that one that Boal invented, which is this, well, I didn't invent it, he discovered it or rediscovered it probably. That nothing is really new, but you know, we keep reinventing these things. So you identify with somebody, but you have a different open door of consciousness, because you know, you're thinking, what would I do in that situation as well? And I call that intersubjective consciousness. And then the third is the immersive theater, sensory labyrinth theater, where you are the theater. So what's interesting about all these three methods is when you experience it, they seem very familiar. You know, theater, the oppressed, is not very difficult to understand, but when you do it, you start thinking, this is something very familiar about this. And then with immersive theater, you've bought a ticket, you come along, where's the rest of the audience? So it's like going to the dentist. You go through every 7 minutes, you're on your own, you're walking along this path. It might be very dark, it might be outdoors, it could be indoors. It doesn't matter for me. And you keep coming across these people, these characters, and you're saying, well, who's the main character in this play? And then you realize, it's me. I'm the hero of this story. And it's this, there's no plot here. I have to make it. I make the plot from my experiences. I'm painting the picture. As I'm walking, I'm making the path as I walk it. Why is this so familiar? And they realize, my God, this is how I am all the time. I'm a character in a play. And then there's this, what I call proprioception. And this comes from David Bohm. We have proprioception. I know where my hand is right now. But a mental proprioception, actually understanding the dynamic that creates consciousness, or the current consciousness that we have, you know, that I'm a person, I have a future and a past, and I'm on a journey, all this story. You see it and you relax. And there's a deep, profound peace when you realize that's not who you really are, you know. And so that's what I aim to do with sensory labyrinth theater, is to create that proprioception. It doesn't happen, you know, all the time, but it happens for a lot of people, and it's life-changing. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Okay, for your own personal journey of transformation, because really, if you're living, you're growing constantly, everything's your instruction, everything's your opportunity. So maybe all the way back to, I always mispronounce everything, but Krishnamurti to now, how has your path evolved for meditation, mindfulness, consciousness, awareness? I like awareness. And that was the one, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the language, but from Wales, and completely foreign to me. But the word for consciousness is the same word for awareness. And you're going to tell us what language that was the proper way. You speak it.
The same word, awareness, is the same as what? Consciousness?
Consciousness.
Ymwybyddiaeth, yeah. I mean, the Welsh term used to be, the formal term for mindfulness was ymwybyddiaeth o falgar, which is kind of careful consciousness. But I kind of campaign to have that changed to meddylgarwch, which means love of mind love, if you like, because you know, mindfulness is a really not a very good translation. And it was actually a Welsh pastor who coined that word for a Pali name, sati, for mindfulness, you know. So it's not a great, it's a word we work with, but it doesn't meet, it's much more heartfulness, you know, really. It's quietening the mind. It's a lovely friend of mine who says, is the journey, the only journey we have to take in life is from here to here.
Yeah. Brilliant. Again. Okay. So what are you constantly reminding yourself of to keep yourself grounded and moving forward?
I guess there's nothing to do. Yeah, there's nothing to do. I mean, you shared those quotes about compassion, and I guess I have a very distinct understanding of compassion that might be different to many people. And the second talk that is in the 4 Simple Questions channel is between Professor Paul Gilbert, who developed compassion focused therapy. So he's a bit of a guru on compassion, lovely man, and Kelly Spencer, who's a non-duality teacher. And what's beautiful for me in that talk is the answer to question 3, which is the first is, who are you? Second is, what is this? And the third is, why is this? Why is this? And, I think a lot of suffering comes from this question, why is this? And Kelly, who's quite, she's not an established teacher, but because of that, her answers come from really something very grounded and raw. She just says there's no room for that question.
I have not seen, that's the one episode I haven't, I started it, but I haven't seen that part.
Yeah. And it was so beautiful because she says, it's just everything's so full of love. There's no room for that question. So, I guess what I remind myself of is that this is it. This is all there is. This is all that is needed. Everything is here. There's nothing to be or do. And then you kind of, your eyes wide open, look around and say, wow, this is, and when we teach mindfulness, some of often the feedback, and it doesn't sound like much, but it's my favorite feedback to teaching mindfulness is, oh, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Just being here. Yeah.
Have you had an experience? I'm going to ask a personal question. Don't answer this if it's not for public consumption, but were you on a walking path one day, or was it a dream state, or was it walking out of a meeting that you, again, we'll use the word epiphany, but can you share with us a personal transformative experience that you haven't yet that still serves as a beacon or a lighthouse on your path ahead?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the story I said about this first play that I saw by Enrique Vargas. So it's called Ariadne's Thread. I go to this hall. I enter the labyrinth. All kinds of amazing experiences, sensory experiences of all kinds. Beautiful, beautiful experiences. Very frightening sometimes. You feel lost. You're totally in the dark. And at one point, I am totally lost. Like really, I don't know if I've gone the wrong way or where I am. And very simple, a hand holds mine and guides me. And, there was all this kind of really beautiful stuff in that experience. But that one, the most simple, was the most powerful, because I realized that I've always had that. There's always a hand there, and like, when you showed me the picture of Geronimo, I think it was older Geronimo, he said, he's told me I've got your back, Yeah, not that one. I think it's the younger one. Yeah, look at that. Imagine that's got your back. He's got your back.
Consummate warrior, fearless, with a lot of practical reminders to keep you paying attention, staying the course, and just do it. Stop thinking up here. Action without thought.
There's also a connection, because I don't know if you know about the history of Wales, but we are the indigenous people of Britain. Our culture is a non-verbal culture. We don't own the land owns us. That's still there. And I grew up in that. Yeah. So, I know it's the beginning of colonialism. We were the first colony, actually. England's first colony was Wales. And they did all their experimentation there, turning tribes to work against each other. Cognitive, what's it called? The first, when they say that your way of thinking is the wrong way, We had laws called the Howell laws, where women were equal to men, and they said that's depraved. So they just made us feel all this shame, but it's still there in our genes. This awareness of the wisdom of the elders and the land, and it's a lot of connections. Yeah, and the anger, of what's been done to this planet. Yeah.
Yeah, I am loving how you're handling the conversation here. I've twice had a little ball of light show up off to the left, off to the right just now as you were talking about Wales and its roots. I'm going to blow a little bit of sage with your permission your way, and I may put a figure up for a topic, and it may be just coming from your own psyche, your own soul, your own crew of loving advisors, or it may be the figure that we put out in front. But with your permission, I'll light some sage. We did this before the show. I've done this for every guest this year. I think we're in the 40s for episodes. And it's just a little bit of sage. It's a kindergarten step. I'm looking at my microphone right here by my elbow. And some people start catching this. This may be 2025. You're actually in Australia or Barcelona watching his future play tomorrow. But give yourself a chance now to be in the now, to be in your heart, and simply receive a little bit of sage smoke wafted through two screens, wherever you are, no time or space, the breakdown by theater of one's reality to a broader reality in the heart. And Iwan, what are you catching there?
I'm getting smoke.
That's okay.
But it's a sweet smoke. It's really nice.
Good.
Really like sitting with your ancestor around a fire.
Ooh, beautifully said. I'm going to stub it out so I don't smoke myself out. And I know to smoke it out for real, because the 3 interviews ago, I was seeing smoke come up behind my laptop. I thought my laptop was on fire, but it was just, I hadn't put it out. But a little bit of a panic right in the middle of having to not show the fear of my laptop's on fire. Okay, why don't we do older Geronimo for a topic about anything? The human condition is such a great question. So what about the human condition? Because I know you've dedicated a portion of your life or more to this pursuit to help others open openness itself. So here's Geronimo. And like a lightning bolt, for anybody out there, put your hand up to the photo. Feel what you can feel. Don't judge. And catch some words if you wish, whoever you are out there, wherever you are, just be in your heart, allow. And you got that okay? What do you have for the audience?
Krishnamurti said that the tears of the world brought me here. And I see in his face the suffering, that when you, the non-duality teacher Rupert Spira says that, when we experience suffering, we resist it. We try and resist it. And he says that it's the resistance that is the suffering. When all resistance is surrendered, then you realize that suffering is joy. But, Geronimo isn't smiling. It's just this deep peace with knowing the suffering somehow, sitting with it. And that's also, of course, what the main aim of mindfulness is, actually to be able to sit with this, the whole catastrophe of life, and just what a catastrophe for Geronimo to sit with the end of his people to some degree, and that culture, and I guess maybe this is a good point to say that what I aim to do with this work is to create the indigenous mindset, because that's the only thing that's going to save this world. That consciousness and describing that indigenous mindset in modern terms is why I'm doing the 4 simple questions, because neuroscience is really getting its grip on how we create this reality.
And it's got to be evidence-based to understand it. I'm kidding. But yes, that's what everybody wants to do. But it's also, what's the expression? It can seem super hard to grasp. Parts of what we're talking about, all of it, the concept that there might be beings of light, if you wish, beyond our thinking. So it seems hard to grasp, but luckily this isn't about thinking. It's about being here, as you said earlier. Now I'm going to give you a choice, door number 1 or door number 2. Now, door number 1 seems to me a lot easier. I'll put up some India figures, maybe 1 or 2 or 3. I'll start with Sai Baba, the one from 100 years ago. And I will try to stall and actually find a colorized version, because I have a beautiful photo of him that I just can't get over. May take a second. But meanwhile, the next door number 2 is your 4 simple questions. You answering, who am I? What is this? Why is this? What's it like to be me? So that one day people can turn to this moment in time, and they've got you on camera for the not punishment that you've dished out to all your beautiful guests. Lisa Cairns and Carl Friston and Rupert Sheldrake and Kelly Spencer, they've all, and Paul Gilbert, I believe, and the others, they've all done such a fabulous job. And just think how many more are coming. But this is going to be almost a little bit of humor, because the spotlight got flipped all of a sudden. There was an earthquake, or the wind blew the lamp around, and it's on you. So would you like to do a little listening to a couple India figures? So much easier. Or who am I? What is this? Why is this? What's it like to be me? And please, everyone, go to YouTube. It's just youtube.com/4 simple questions. You'll find his channel. Please subscribe and be more, enjoy it, obviously, first, but share, like, and there's still one more action in there, but you'll figure it out. Okay, door number 1, door number 2. It's pressure.
Well, it's funny that you door number 1. It's interesting because I have some history with not that Sai Baba, but the more recent Sai Baba. Maybe that would be interesting. And
Okay.
There's a question there for me as well. Is that worth it? Or am I?
Door number 1 with the figures from India, sure. But how about we do 3 that I know? I've not ever interacted with the one with the hair. Yeah, and that's the more recent one. But here's Sai Baba from, I think he passed in like 1918, 1915, somewhere in there. But he's compassion, 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 intersects 3 of those religions. And tight with angels, for people out there watching and listening, very tight with angels, Mr. Miracles, if you don't mind. And there are no limits. Good luck allowing for it in your personal life, but that's part of our exploration, the journey. And so he's such a great one to bring to you sensory, physical, detailed answers. And if you wish, catch a jungle smell, the best part of India, the richest part in the air. Let him bring that to you. And the Divine Mother, there's the tiger. I'm going to lose my English. There's the tiger. That's action like Geronimo. And that's the tiger that goes with the Divine Mother. So people put their hand out and can feel a tiger walk by in the fur. Very friendly. On your team if you need an action figure. So whatever you need, Iwan, to bring in the jungle of India, and maybe a temple incense smell that's exotic to the point you could never purchase it in a store anywhere. But what do you have to share with us?
I have lots of stories from India.
Ooh, please.
Lots. Okay. I was there in the 80s, traveled around as a photographer. I went to Sai Baba's ashram. Very, very, very strong energy. I was there for a night called Mahashivarashtra, where the population goes to 40,000, and I was shown all my past lives, like a flip book, really. And it was hilarious. You talk about laughing. It was the funniest thing, how this sense of self-importance, you know, when our true nature is, it's so much bigger. um, and just this immense feeling of gratitude and you know, this sense of Satchitananda, you know, you just feel like you are the universe. And that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But then there was this dark energy that says, if you want to feel this, then you have to give me the reins of your soul, if you like. And I kind of retreated back to Krishnamurti. Actually, I think Krishnamurti inoculated me to this kind of offer, but I was very, very interested in how if you like, spiritual power does not equate with goodness all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's unconditional love, the way I put it. There's unlove and there's love.
Yeah, but that element of control, and but I that's, yeah, well, this is the guy. Yeah.
I found the colorized version.
Oh, beautiful. So then I think it was a bit later, I ended up in a temple with bananas, my fruit of choice. And handing out bananas to the temple kids, you know, and one kind of attached to me all day, and we just hung out all day, couldn't speak the same language or anything, and it was just this beautiful, simple presence, not wanting anything, not having anything. And that picture reminds me of that little boy. Yeah, that was special. And that was a kind of huge lifting of this darkness, really, from that experience before. Yeah.
I have another figure from India. It could be Vishnu, Krishna, Ganesh, Lakshmi, so Rama, Mother Teresa, if you wish. But there's a younger fellow who passed when he was 42, around 2012. Sri Kaleshwar. Two guests on the show this year have had connections. Alan Steinfeld, who's done 3,000 shows, is, I think it's New Realities out of New York. So he actually went to India, and you can catch it on YouTube, a 2-part series, 26 minutes of when the guy was living. And I describe him as love on an Indian breeze. Even if they were one way alive, I know people have issues with this figure, that figure over there. Remember, there's a reconciliation process if I had to try to say one concrete detail about anything, so that you can't be unconditional love without being unconditional love, or it's unlove. So there's a little bit of a trust factor here for allowing these figures simply to help, get answers, get hugs, get healing, let go of what you need to let go of, and get living more. But this guy, love on an Indian breeze, very gentle. You'll let me know if you've got preference to more Rama, Mother Teresa, some of the more well-known names. But here is Sri Kaleshwar. He was the wedding officiant for Alan Steinfeld in New York. And also, we just had on Vazi Therese Rose Lopez, who spent a lot of time in India studying and is very devout that way, but very wide open on everything else in the world, and big into mindfulness, meditation, and so on. But here's Sri Kaleshwar, whether you've heard of him or not, very much about the heart and allowing and living. My lights keep popping in. But if you wish, catch something in the air, a beautiful scent, flowers, something only in India that, you know, jogs the memory. And if you wish, get a little nudge, whether it's from your team, from your psyche, from your higher self, your soul, on another topic related to this. India is a very special place. To me, I always say it's 40 countries in one, depending on what you go in with and what you allow for, and then what you come out with. And good. What do you have for us?
Okay. Well, I shared this with somebody sitting next to me in a cafe the other day, and he was blown away by it. So And that's what that face brought to me. And this, I don't know if this, I'm actually teaching a new curriculum, mindfulness curriculum, with staff doctors at the moment. And a lot of the doctors are prenatal consultants. So I was kind of curious to know if this, what I'm going to tell you is true or not scientifically, but I was told it by a cranial sacral therapist. And he explained that when the egg is fertilized, it replicates and it creates a strip of cells. And on the top of the strip of cells, a very special cell is created. If I ask you, Michael, to guess, what do you think that cell at the top is?
The brain.
Yeah, that's the kind of what we would think, isn't it? But it's not, it's the heart. And those strip of cells is your spine. And what happens next is the top, it bends over and it attaches. So the heart cell attaches to where your heart is now. And then the face is created in the heart. And then it comes out like this. And then the hands are created in the heart and they come out like that. And I thought that was so beautiful. So one of the activities I do in my workshop, one of my workshops, is to actually rehearse this feeling, our first movement. When I see that face, I just see that that face has been created in such a big heart, you know. And also for us, it kind of puts into place, I mean, there's so much emphasis on appearances and cosmetic surgery, and especially, you know, in this televisual field or whatever. But when we think about the sacredness of the face in those terms, that is created in the heart, that they're connected. I love that. It makes me smile.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. I'm going to give you 4 more quotes. Never done it this way before, but I feel like we're almost in the sort of sensory labyrinth the way we're handling the interview. No, non-linear, absolutely, whatever comes to mind. It'll all turn out fantastic. So let me just give you a few different inputs, and we'll see what your senses come up with.
Mm.
I've said one of these before. Everything around you is your instruction.
Mm.
And then from India, and I've forgotten who said this, but a mind that is fast is sick. A mind that is slow is sound. A mind that is still is divine. The time is always now. Action with no thought. And finally, trust more, worry less. Very practical.
Mm. Yeah. Some non-duality teachers say there isn't even a moment. There's no moment to be in.
Or all moments can be the same.
Yeah, there is only this moment in the sense that for there to be a moment, there has to be a past and a future, but all past and future is here now. You know, we invented time, so not everything appears to happen at the same time, but it's thought. The invention of time is, well, thought is time in a way. This is what David Bohm said, that thought is time. So when there's no thought, there's no time. And I think when I teach mindfulness, and why I've developed a new curriculum is because I think the old curriculum is not suited to the current world. It was developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn in the 70s and 80s, before we had these things.
Yep.
And when I teach it now, a lot of people, so there's this state of mind called the default mode network. So what happened when brain scanners started to be used and scientists were putting subjects into the brain scanner, and they would just say, can you just stay there for a moment while we set up the experiment? They looked at the scanners and there was always the same pattern. And they thought, well, what is this pattern? We're not doing anything. We haven't asked them to do anything. What is this pattern? And it became known as a default mode network, which is just thinking about the future and the past. But when they put long-term meditators in, it was a totally different pattern, what's called the experiential mode, where they just actually, oh, my foot is itchy, or I feel warm, or, you know, it's all just about direct experience. But when we teach mindfulness in the conventional way, we ask people to pay attention to the breath or the body. So we give it an object of focus. So we're training, it's more like an attention technology. But nowadays, because there's a deficit in the default mode network, we never have time to let our minds wander because we've always got some content to consume. And that's why the theory is called context-oriented theater. What if we orient towards context rather than content? But it's ubiquitous. It's with us all the time in this mobile, and I think the danger of this device is because the human brain is devised to exploit the environment. That's its function, and the environment here is infinite, so we never get to the end of it. So our brain just latches onto this, seeking to exploit the environment, which is infinite. Yeah. So
It's our Zen master, whether we know it or not, for better or for worse.
Exactly. So when I teach mindfulness now, I actually encourage default mode network because we're short of it. We're starving for it before we go on to the focus bit, because people try focusing and they fail miserably and they never try again. They never come to mindfulness again because they feel like, oh, I just can't do this, or it's not for me. Yeah. So I do something called dropping the balloon. So it's so simple. So we just walk around the room pretending we're holding up a balloon, keeping it up. And I call them dynamic metaphors because rather than saying the metaphor that, thoughts are like balloons, we do it. We pretend that we've got this balloon and we try and have a conversation. And this goes on for a while and people get sore arms. And I say, okay, let's sit down. Let's just drop the balloon. Just drop it. And it's so simple, but yet so profound for people, because the first stage really of disengaging from default mode network is to realize you don't have to, there's nothing to do. There's just this. There's nothing to gain. There's nothing to understand, nothing to explain. It's just this. And this is a mystery. It is such a mystery. I don't use the word magic. I use mystery. Yeah. Because magic is also an element of will in there. And I guess that's going back to Sai Baba. I think the mystery is more about flow and allowing a greater wisdom, if you like, to come through. Yeah.
Angels once said, like my memory, I'm a constant blank. So I view that as a positive. It doesn't mean I don't have tons of thinking, but when I do go blank, a lot of stuff happens. Not good for regurgitating quotes, but there's nothing to gain. There's nothing to lose. Move past seeing the negative. And I think the rest of it is like allow more, trust more, love more, share love always, stuff like that. Breathe more. You get the idea.
Yeah. I like the Chogyam Trungpa quote is the bad news is we're falling through a sky. There's no parachute and there's nothing to hold on to. The good news is there's no ground.
And I have his photo. He's one of the very original figures. And because I'm very American and I'm the last candidate in the world, but I'm the first candidate in the world, I'm very enthusiastic. So this suits me to help others if it's appropriate to open up. But Chogyam Trungpa comes along, and I've been mispronouncing everything my whole life. Street names, people's names. We got yours straight, I hope. But Rinpoche, I didn't know it was said that way until just recently. So luckily somebody trained in Buddhism, the Buddhist chaplain, Mark Shimada, who will be a panel guest, will have been a panel guest by the time this episode comes out, but hopefully will be a show guest in Prague and American Beautiful. When he came along, he asked that we use his younger photo. I was like, Americans are going to have, this is a mouthful. What can we call you? And he said, call me Gentle Frank. That was his words, his choice. So whether you call him Chogyam Trungpa, Tibetan Buddhist monk, Lama, if you wish, or Gentle Frank, you can catch a sense of Tibet. If you wish to close your eyes and see the Tibetan wheel or something sacred, you may. If you're really gutsy out there, close your eyes, put your hand out to your right, feel him either touch your shoulder or your hand. If you're trying too hard, it'll be your shoulder. But he'll show you a view from a mountaintop, not just the valley, but the skies. You can catch any scent you wish. If you wish to hear the bells, I don't know, the music from a nearby temple, you could even turn and see it if your eyes are shut and you're just already off. But if you could allow Chogyam Trungpa to make a suggestion for a topic in line with the direction you're flowing. Good. And a little theater.
Yeah. Well, Chogyam Trungpa wrote a book called Spiritual Materialism, didn't he, I think? Is that right?
Yes. I think I have it. Yep, I see it. It's right. I think it's that one right there, the very faint yellow one.
Yeah. And I guess, for me, it's there was a time I could have been a guru, and I think again Krishnamurti inoculated me, and I kind of ran a mile away, in the opposite direction, because I think whenever you come into this presence, then all I feel is gratitude and humility, really, and just feel blessed to be able to create this with groups, so I don't sit on a chair and have people. That's the Cartesian model, people are watching me and I speak from some space, because I'm not awake. I'm as messed up as most of us, but I have this ability to create that space in a group with people, and it's a huge blessing as well for me when at the end of this work they all thank each other and forget to thank me. I can
That's
disappear.
awesome.
Yeah, I've disappeared somehow. Yeah.
Where do you see this headed? Now, this is a question fraught with danger because, again, no past, no future. What are you going to do? But if you had to pick 3 cities to bring a well-funded tour through, what absolutely sends your entire essence of being thrilled? Would it be to go to Barcelona? Would it be to go to Buenos Aires or another place in South America? Can you pick 3 cities that if in the next 10 years you were fully funded, you were operationed out, you actually had assistance off the charts too, you still did not have a chair and you still did everything you were doing now, but it's just even more flowing than it already is? What are the 3 cities you would love to be, I don't know what to call it, directing, producing, making it happen?
Yeah. I'd like to. I've never done anything in America. I was invited once to, I think it was Albuquerque, with indigenous people or First Nation peoples, I think, and that didn't happen. I mean, COVID, I think, was the reason for that. But I'd like to revisit that possibility to do something there with native, or not just with native people, but looking at the First Nation issues. That's 1. 2. I should pay homage to India, I think. Arantula, Tiruvannamalai, is the kind of center of where Ramana Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi, had his ashram, and kind of began this new Advaita kind of non-duality school. And you talked about mountains as well, and that brought to mind that his guru was a mountain, yeah. And how that mountain came about is a really important story for me as well, with Shiva, Brahman, and Vishnu, and the pillar of light, which is really a really good explainer of non-duality. So I'd love to do one there. my son's moving there, which is possibly makes it a possibility. And I'd like to do it in Greece or maybe even Troy, in Turkey, Crete or Troy, because that's where the labyrinth comes from. And I had a Greek anthropologist come to see a show I did in Sofia in Bulgaria. And these shows last about 4 hours. She waited till the end to come to me, and she said, "You've recreated the Eleusinian mysteries." So the Eleusinian mysteries happened for 1,000 years, 500 BC to 500 AD in Greece. And every Athenian, anybody who had the title Athenian, had to go through the mysteries. But they were secret. You were not allowed to divulge what happened there. So that's why we still don't know what they were. But they involved some kind of labyrinth. and there was some kind of like a chest that people opened, and inside was something transformational. Nobody knows what it is. But the important thing is that mystery is what Cato said civilized humanity, to be able to create democracy. There wouldn't be democracy without the mysteries. So it introduced, so there we come back full circle to the idea that an aesthetic experience changes consciousness, and that changes civilization. And without trying to sound, without sounding messianic, I think, this context-oriented arts changes the consciousness. And I'm really curious about what kind of civilization does it create? What kind of post-democratic structure does it create? And I've called that rheocracy. So a lot of my work is thinking about, what does rheocracy look like? Rule by flow. I'm working with a psychologist who's an expert in flow called Sarah Gregg. She'd be great to be on your show. She's written 2 books about flow. Find Your Flow is one of them. And she has a journaling methodology which she uses, which is really, really beautiful. So envisioning what rheocracy looks like, what the civilization that is sustainable, that honors this earth, what does it look like? And if a possible transition to that, if it's possible for it to be a gentle transition, that would be wonderful. But I'm not sure if that'll ever happen. But there's so many things we can draw from that ancient wisdom of indigenous people to help us to get there. And one of those is something I called viable poverty. This idea of there's this huge fear of having nothing, but being able to live viably when you don't need anything would be such a gift, wouldn't it, to live in such a world?
Strips away the layers of varnish.
Yeah.
Listening is how I would say it, it's not to me or to any one particular person, but just listening. The universe, the tree, the rock, consciousness does speak all the time. You merely have to pump the brakes a little on your reality, what my situation is, my problem is, to allow more. I have to tell a funny story, non-duality. In the early 90s, I was in New York City in my, 20s. I always looked super young. If I'm 55 now, imagine at 24, I looked like I was 14. I lost every client face-to-face on Wall Street, but I had a good phone voice that at least got me the client, so yay. But I wrote down in this diary, non-duality, and these amazing quotes, and I'll try to find one while you're chatting on one of the answers in the future. It's a gorgeous, from India, from, I can't name the guy's name, but a venerable figure. Non-duality. I think it was 23 years later, I finally got the definition in non-duality. Somebody had given me Thich Nhat Hanh's book. We'll have to tee him up. And I'm sitting in an Acura dealership parking lot on a curb with watching leaves swirl in a whatever those little 2 foot tall, 1 meter tall swirls are. And I'm reading Thich Nhat Hanh's book. His only incomplete sentence is blah, 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 non-duality, period. And I've waited now. I didn't have anybody to call, and I didn't know anybody in the Buddhist Zen circles or anybody who was going to even entertain this question. And I wasn't smart enough to just look it up and do the work. But blah, 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 non-duality. And it said not to, period. So the only incomplete sentence in this whole piece is every step. And it was an epiphany, as you say, because I was like, oh my God, I waited 23 years for that description. And there's a quote from the princess or queen of Hawaii. In heaven, there's but one, and on earth, there's two. And I love that one as well. So I had to mention that. And I wanted to mention Plato, unconditional love, spirit guide. Don't get a hug from him. Fist pump touch on the shoulder. It's sweaty. And more people say, because they get into the flow and they forget that I've specifically said, don't get a hug, fist pump touch on the shoulder. It's not his thing. You're going to be like, it's sweaty. And then they blame me later and they're like, I was sweaty. So here is Plato. You can see his face in there, mustache, eyes.
Wow.
And go ahead and get something for public consumption. But if you're ready, close your eyes. And if you could, I'm not sure, I'm staying out of this, but you can be shown the chest, or you can be shown something exciting for, we'll make it door number 1. We're doing doors today. Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, or he'll throw all 3 doors open. This is private for you. You'll share what you want to share. But catch a little bit of grease in the air. Let's go. I'm a water guy, beaches. So, where to go on vacation is the most important question. But have him share with you a touch of grease, ancient grease, if you wish. And when you're ready, I can't see you, so I'll pull back a little. Close your eyes and receive something. A vision is a great way to say it. What'd you get?
The vision, I'll tell you, I love this quote that if there's no light at the end of the tunnel, it's not a tunnel, it's a cave. Just turn around and go out the way you came in. And so I see I'm in a cave, and there's this entrance, exit to the cave, and there's this stunning beach, blue sea, sand. And maybe that comes from, the Plato cave metaphor, Plato's cave, which is a beautiful, beautiful metaphor about awakening.
I love it. There's a quote that I'm not looking, that I can't find, but it had to do with the perspective of innocence. For here virtue and vice are one. But it was non-duality was in there, and it's a beautiful quote. It's very sophisticated, not one that I can just snap off, but I always refer to it. I always stumble over it until I find it. I bought a home in Austin, Texas, and I took these quotes, like whether I could relate to them or not, I don't know, but I put it on a piece of paper, I framed it. I put it behind a door so people wouldn't just be coming to the house and staring at this and ask me why I was putting it up. But it was almost like putting it here, and maybe I would absorb it over time. The wisdom of the quotes. And I can give one that's an old Irish proverb. You learn that the fence needs mending when the sheep have gone away. So I love that one. I mean, that almost is all you need for life. Okay, with your permission, let me do one more figure for you. Ganesh.
Mhm.
And if you wish, can we have you juggle 6 balls at once? Not to make you a juggler, but you've been a joker before. So put your hand out, feel the vibe through 3 screens, my iPhone, my MacBook Pro, and your screen, all the way in Stroud, England, even though originally from like Wales, partly in Cardiff, and it's iwanbrioc.com, iwanbrioc.com. And then also ask for a hug or a blessing, good fortune, or simply creativity, whatever your vocabulary is and what you wish to bring in more of. And if you could also catch sensory, that's 3 balls if I do my math correctly. And fourth, an insight or a reminder, since everything really is a reminder at one level. And fifth, if you want to hear the tiger roar in a distant Indian jungle, very satisfactory roar, not threatening for anybody out there. If they hear the roar, please put it in the comments. People have been getting this stuff all the time at different times. You just have to be open. Good luck with that. It's like gambling in Casablanca. I'm shocked to see there's gambling going on. I don't know if that refers to thinking or being in your heart, but you get the metaphor. Good.
I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring in the background.
Not yet.
That's not me. That's not me wheezing, but okay. So there's 6 things there. What were they again?
Ooh, feeling, but also getting like whooshes or hugs or touches or energy vibe, sensory, smelling, an insight or reminder to remember something, but also the roar of a tiger. If you wish, you can put your hand out into the open part of the room, close your eyes. This is full acting now, or we'll call it letting go, because even acting isn't the best word for this. Full letting go, and let the tiger walk by and feel the fur. But I need you to clearly say, I got that for this one, because people need to hear it verbally to understand more is possible in each moment, even if there are no such things as moments. It's just being. I'm borrowing from his playbook and stalling by talking out loud right now. I'll still look for that quote if you'll do what you do best and entertain us just for a little bit longer with it's wisdom that we're hearing. And I'll buy more time because I found the quote. Siddha Katrapa. Whatever the yogin sees is his instruction, in realization that all he sees is unborn. That is the most excellent guru. Innocence is the way to realize non-duality, for here the effects of virtue and vice are one. And that was where I stumbled over non-duality and did not understand the quote for 23 years. Thanks to Acura, and thanks to my friend who lent me, his wife lent me the Pieces Every Step, Thich Nhat Hanh book. Okay, did you feel the tiger? Did you hear the tiger? Or you think you did? Or no, it's okay to say anything.
Just to my left is this vicious dog that's sleeping. That's kind of half tiger. But she's old now. But yeah, I feel this power.
And here's Thich Nhat Hanh for you. How about a mantra? It's personal use, so don't share it. But there's that old saying from India that the person received the mantra and knew it would be of great benefit for everyone else. So ran to the top of the mountain knowing, or the top of the hill knowing, probably get in trouble for this. And he shared that powerful mantra with everyone. And instead of getting rebuked, I think he just got another mantra. And that in one version of the story, you know, he's probably put to death. But the other version of the story, he's rewarded with bravo for going even bigger. Because there's always, I don't like this, more. There's always broader, more heart, more compassion, more allowing. And you'll be surprised at what happens, which, again, your theater productions, woof. Okay, Thich Nhat Hanh. And maybe there's a mantra that everyone can share with, and then we'll get back to a wrap up for the show and just have us, if you don't mind giving us reminders to live more, allow more, love more, but spoken from your experience and where you're at and where you'd like to be at, which of course contradicted everything we've just said in the show. But there's only the present. Okay, or there is no present.
Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this seminal book on mindfulness, The Miracle of Mindfulness, and there's a beautiful, beautiful passage there about washing dishes. And he says every moment is a miracle. So that would be my mantra. Every moment is a miracle. And I would extend it maybe to say, because this is what we ask, and this is what we invite when I do context-oriented arts. I invite the group, I say, to take the risk of falling awake to the miracle of being alive.
That's beautiful. Okay, let's wrap it up here. What would you like people to discover either on your website? I still think it's the documentary series, so I'm going to mention that one more time. YouTube.com at 4 spelled out simple questions, and there you can again check out Lisa Cairns, Paul Gilbert. Lisa Cairns is paired with Carl Fritzen, but Paul Gilbert, Kelly Spencer, but Rupert Sheldrake with the amazing gentleman. I don't know how. Can you tell us how you found him? I cannot pronounce his last name. I probably can't pronounce his first name. Seems like he's from India, but he lives in the UK or America or something. Who is that gentleman?
Ragi Kadir Kamar. He's based in Portugal, originally from Sri Lanka. Went to private school in England, so he's kind of half, and his mother's French. His father was the foreign minister of Sri Lanka, who was unfortunately assassinated in his retirement. But he is a really remarkable teacher with access to dimensions, and I have evidence of it. Sees everything. Well, he actually, it's quite interesting. He just says he accesses those dimensions and asks, and then he's given or not given. But he has remarkable intuition. And coming up is Jim Newman with Sue Blackmore. So Sue Blackmore is a feisty neuroscientist. Ooh. And Jim Newman is a very famous American non-duality teacher. So he's worth looking at as well. So I haven't filmed that yet. I'm filming it next week on my birthday. So that'll be a really, I think it'll be quite a feisty one.
Wow. Big 37, congratulations. I wanted to mention, okay, how there are certain people you just at the moment wouldn't foresee being on the show. I don't need to name any names. It would be, you can catch strong intellects out there that say everything exists, nothing exists. It's this, it's that. Those are big figures out there. I'm dying to say a couple names because it's what fills us. If you go hit YouTube or the news or just seminars or books, a lot of people out there telling others how it is. And again, this is maybe why theater is so attractive, because it's left to a sudden self-discovery, if I may say it that way. Can you give us a reminder of the purpose behind 4 simple questions and how, in a way, you've paralleled sensory labyrinth and used some more of the terminology there to bring it to YouTube, so that as you sit and you hear the gentleness of these voices you've selected, or they've selected you without knowing it. Talk to us about this. How is it very similar to your theater.
Right. Well, I'll start with, the initial idea. I don't know if you've seen a film called My Dinner with Andre. It's
but along 80s?
Yeah, 1982, I think it came out. And it's just a conversation between a New York theater director called Andre Gregory and Wally. I can't remember his surname now, another actor. They're still alive, actually. And it's just a conversation in a cafe between them two, and it's profound. It's an amazing, amazing film directed by Louis Malle. And I wanted to create the same in a 3D. So Lisa Cairns, who's a non-duality teacher, she uses the metaphor of virtual reality goggles, that we're wearing these goggles, and when you awaken, you take them off. So I thought, what if we were to make a VR movie about these people talking about it, so that you're actually embodying the metaphor that they're talking about. So again, I wanted to create this dynamic metaphor so that when you take your goggles off, you leave something behind there as well, which is this illusion of a self that has a future and a past. And then which is what non-duality is about, is awakening to the fact that there's nobody here. True nature is cosmic, if you like, cosmic consciousness. And anyway, so I get in touch with Carl Friston. So Carl Friston is probably one of the most important neuroscientists on the planet at the moment. And with his colleagues, he's created a model of consciousness called the projective consciousness model, which is the one that is most kind of scientifically reliable, because it looks into the mathematics, brain scans, and all this kind of thing. And it basically sounds like non-duality. Basically sounds, what we do is what he talks about, the Markov blankets. So if you were to put a drop of water on your desk, and it just dissipated along the probability line, so it just goes, then that would be one thing. But if it were to suddenly gather itself, so the drop dissipates, but then it gathers, so it goes against the line of probability, then you know that there's something alive there. There's a living organism of some kind. And he talks about that being the indicator of life, that it gathers towards a center, and it has a boundary called the Markov blanket. So that's basically life, or things thinging, and that's all we are. We are just things thinging, like everything else, and everything is alive. Everything is something thinging. And that's the basis, the deep basis of consciousness. The projective consciousness model is the idea that we've gone beyond the physical to create this center to which things gather. And so the function of consciousness is to gather evidence for our own existence. So that's the kind of bad news, because we don't exist. And the really bad news is there's nothing we can do about it. So that's where non-duality comes in, is just giving into it. So that conversation, for instance, Lisa is a friend of mine and a great teacher of non-duality, is that they're given those questions to find a meeting point. And what's incredible is that those meeting points can be found in science now. So, and this is not just kind of wishy-washy science, or what they call it, kind of pseudoscience, if you like. I mean, I'm not criticizing people who have that label, because Rupert Sheldrake has been fighting that label for a long time, when he's very robust in his science. But no, I'm talking about robust scientists. They're starting to talk like non-duality teachers. So it's not difficult to get them to meet. And that for me is just a miracle, absolute miracle, and happening at this time in the history of the world where it's so important to hear this message.
Well, there's that front, and then there's the front on disclosure with scientists and politicians and many other quadrants, business people, talking about issues in a very mature, productive, and enlightening way. But I mean, I have to say, I'm pigeonholed, unfortunately, as very robust, but over 6 fences. and I'm the distant cousin on the farm that most people won't want to look at. I've interacted with Rupert, our household, like maybe 2012, 2011, 2013, but you would have to be crazy to want to let go and physically see beings and communicate with them and get healing and hugs, and colorblind people have seen color. So it's really what will a person allow for, which we're back to the whole meaning of life and non-duality and all the big questions. And I love that you've got 4 simple questions. Again, I think you've dodged the bullet, though. I am going to ask 4 final questions because I was smart enough to remember this at the last second. I must have gotten nudged. Okay, so who are you? Iwan, who are you?
I don't know.
Oh, and you've had that. If you have a production team or anyone else on the inside of your creative process, they are dying right now if they're watching this down the road. Okay, so what is this? What are we in right now? What surrounds us? What's in us? What can we expect? How do we manage all this?
Right. Well, this is theater. And I mean, I want to clarify that because, and this is an important issue right now. And I don't want to, I'm not American, but I know your country is in a specific place in its history. And there are people who are manipulating that fact. And this is where I talk about magic, maybe, that they're using that knowledge to manipulate negatively. So when I say we are theater, there's no, the appearance of a character, which is me, that wants things or feels there's something lacking, is part of that theater as well. Mm-hmm. And when that is seen, that character falls away. So it
reminds me of Plato's cave and the shadows cast by the fire on the wall. And it's a great allegory. I like the prison cell allegory. The jail cell door is open. You know, my situation is I'm looking out the window, holding the bars. I'm trapped. It could be credit card debt, family divorce, help this. I can't get what I want. And the mind, it's all very real.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's important to recognize there's a reality as well. It's not theater. That when I say this is all theater, it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. It really matters. Yeah.
You know, the next question that's coming.
Yeah, why is this?
I'll answer to buy time for you, which is just I'm going to borrow is that Beatles and Love Actually and all the rest. Love is all there is. Love, sharing more love, allowing, rediscovering what you knew as a kid at some point, even between beatings. That just getting back to the heart, getting back to basics, breathing, living, loving, tasting, all the things you've been talking about. But that's my cheat, and I bought you your time. Iwan, what do you got for us? Why is this?
Why is this? Can you hear the answer?
Pause between talking. Okay, that works. We'll give you an A+ on that. Now, what's it like to be you? And you're a constant work in progress. We know you're not perfect. Welcome to being human. I'm back to Casablanca and the gendarme, chief of police, walking into the casino. I'm shocked to see there's gambling going on here. That's, to me, thinking and lots of poker chip stacks, our value systems. We like to rearrange the chips in the middle of the game. Meanwhile, the waiter walks up with the envelope and says, "Your winnings, sir." He tucks it into his tunic and yells, "Arrest the usual suspects." So the usual suspects, that's what we're seeing all the time on TV. It's what's going on in America, everywhere else. Welcome to the human condition. The drama in all senses. No drama, just Rama. I love saying that. Okay, so what's it like to be you? But what's it like to be you starting in 2024, 2026 and beyond? Pretend there's even more wind in the sails. That's a safe metaphor.
Yeah, love that. Wind in the sails. So in Welsh, we have a word called hwyl. Hwyl. It means it's like ciao or have fun. And hwyl is sail. So it's what people said, have a full sail, you know. So that's what we say in Welsh, it's hwyl. Or hwyl fawr, big sail.
Yeah, why not? If you don't go big, go home. We're already all sitting at home, so go big.
So I'd love a big sale over the next years that takes me over the world doing this work. And what's it like to be me? There's a lot of loose cannons on the ship.
Any
Um,
pirates, or is it all formal colony? Like, is it the British Navy? What are we regimented, or are we creative, or is it a bunch of buccaneers? Or give us a different metaphor.
no, it's more like a raft.
Oh my God. Okay.
High seas.
Minimalist.
Yeah. Um, what's it like to be me? It's on this raft, and it's a gentle swell, and I am every day grateful and aware that it's like that. Being aware that it isn't like that for many people in the world right now, and just so lucky and grateful to meet people like yourself, Michael, and be invited to have this. Really, it's been great fun. Really, really great fun.
Thank you very much for being on the show. I'll ask for a final bit of advice to help us all ease what we think is so important in front of us and to switch our perspective. Do you have it could be just breathe, laugh, let go. It could be just watch your show on YouTube. But what's your last bit of advice for the viewer out there, whether they're a 50-year, 20-year professional healer to the doctor watching?
It's an invite. It's an exciting invite. What if all there is this? Just this.
I'm hearing Lisa Karen, if I said her last name correctly, beating a drum somewhere, even though she wouldn't be beating a drum. But beautiful. Iwan, thank you for being on Angels, Positivity, and Love. Absolute treat to hear some essence from your experiences and what you bring to others as well, and your own growth. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Michael. It's been a great fun, really.
Thank you.